Episode 1. The Stranger in the Dust. The wind howled across the Montana plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant cry of a coyote. Under a blood-red sunset, Clara Hayes tightened her grip on the reins, her sharp brown eyes scanning the dusty trail to her ranch. At 25, she was no stranger to the harshness of Cottonwood Bend, the sudden blizzards, the endless days tending wheat fields, the wary glances from townsfolk. But tonight, something felt wrong. A chill ran down her spine, as if the wind whispered a warning. Her father's ranch, now hers, sat nestled in the valley, its golden field stretching toward a weathered wooden house. Since her husband James died of fever 2 years ago, Clara had learned to survive alone. But a new threat loomed. Jacob Randall, a ruthless land baron, wanted her land, and he wasn't asking politely. Last week, a neighbor's barn burned to ash for refusing to sell. Clara wasn't one to back down, but she knew she was fighting a losing battle. Hoofbeats thundered in the distance, shattering the silence. Clara spun around, her hand instinctively gripping the rifle strapped to her saddle. 3 riders emerged from the horizon, black horses kicking up dust, faces masked by bandanas. "Just what I needed," she muttered, her heart pounding. "Clara Hayes!" one shouted, his voice rough as gravel. "Time's up. Sell the land or we burn it to the ground." Clara's jaw tightened. She raised her rifle, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You tell Randall I'd sooner die than give up my home." The leader laughed, a cold, mocking sound, and spurred his horse forward. Clara's finger hovered over the trigger, but before she could fire, a sharp crack split the air. The leader's horse reared, and he tumbled into the dirt. From the ridge above, a lone figure on horseback emerged. A man, his hat low, a revolver glinting in his hand. "Ride out," the stranger called, his voice low and steady, "or the next shot won't miss." The riders hesitated, then turned and galloped into the ridge dusk. Clara lowered her rifle, her breath ragged, and studied the man as he rode down the ridge. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face half hidden by the brim of his hat. His eyes, though, green as the pines, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharper than intended. He holstered his gun and tipped his hat slightly. "Name's Ethan Cole, just passing through." "Passing through doesn't explain why you're saving my skin," she said, narrowing her eyes. "What do you want?" Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Maybe I just don't like bullies, or maybe I'm looking for someone in this town. Either way, you looked like you could use a hand." Clara studied him, her instincts torn. He'd saved her, but there was something guarded in his gaze, a shadow that hinted at secrets. In Cottonwood Bend, strangers didn't risk their lives for nothing. Still, she couldn't ignore the way her heart skipped when he'd spoken, his voice roused, yet warm like whiskey on a cold night. "Those men will be back," she said, holstering her rifle. "If you're staying, you'd better not bring trouble to my door." Ethan's eyes flickered with something unreadable, amusement or maybe regret. "Trouble's already here, Miss Hayes. Question is, can you handle it?" Before she could answer, a shout echoed from the ranch. Smoke was rising from the barn, a faint orange glow flickering in the twilight. Clara's blood ran cold. "No," she whispered, spurring her horse forward. Ethan followed without a word, his presence a strange comfort as they raced toward the fire. But as the flames grew brighter, one question burned in Clara's mind. Who was this stranger, and what did he really want? Will Clara save her ranch from the fire, and can she trust the mysterious Ethan Cole? Hit that subscribe button and join us for Episode 2 to find out. Episode 2: Sparks in the Night. The air was thick with smoke as Clara Hayes spurred her horse toward the glowing barn. The flames licked at the wooden walls, casting an eerie orange light across the Montana night. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything she stood to lose. This ranch was her father's legacy, her home, her fight, and now it was burning. "Clara, wait!" Ethan Cole's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and urgent. His black horse galloped beside hers, his silhouette stark against the fire's glow. "You can't just charge in." "I'm not losing it all," she shouted back, her voice raw. She didn't trust him, not yet, but his presence was a tether in the storm, grounding her even as her world threatened to crumble. They reached the barn, and Clara leaped from her saddle, her boots hitting the dirt hard. The heat was suffocating, the crackle of burning wood drowning out the crickets. She grabbed a bucket from the water trough, her hands trembling, but raw. "Salute." Ethan was at her side in an instant, yanking off his jacket to beat back the flames creeping up the barn door. "Focus on the base," he called, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We can still save it if we move fast." Clara didn't argue. Together they worked in a frantic rhythm, her splashing water, him smothering the smaller flames. Sweat stung her eyes, and her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. Neither did Ethan. For a stranger, he fought like the ranch was his own, and that thought stirred something in her. A flicker of gratitude, or maybe something deeper. After what felt like hours, the flames began to die, leaving the barn scorched, but standing. Clara dropped the bucket, her knees weak, and leaned against the trough. The night was quiet again, save for the hiss of smoldering wood. Ethan stood a few feet away, his chest heaving, his hat pushed back to reveal sweat-slicked dark hair and those piercing green eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice softer now, though still edged with suspicion. "Why risk your neck for a stranger's barn?" Ethan wiped soot from his face, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I'm not as much a stranger to trouble as you think," he said. "Besides, I've seen what men like Randall do. I don't stand for it." Clara crossed her arms, studying him. His words were smooth, but there was a weight to them, like a man carrying ghosts. She wanted to press in, to demand the truth behind those guarded eyes, but a shout from the house interrupted her. "Clara, you all right?" It was Maggie, her closest friend, and the town seamstress, running toward them with a lantern swinging in her hand. Her auburn curls bounced, and her freckled face was tight with worry. "I saw the smoke from my place. What in heaven's name happened?" "Randall's men," Clara said grimly, brushing ash from her sleeve. "They tried to burn me out." Maggie's eyes widened, then flicked to Ethan, who stood silently by the trough. "And who's this?" she asked, her tone teasing but curious. "Ethan Cole," he said, tipping his hat. "Just passing through." Maggie raised an eyebrow, glancing at Clara with a knowing look. "Passing through, huh? Seems like you're doing more than passing, mister." Clara shot her friend a warning glance, but Maggie's grin only widened. "Hush," Clara said. "We've got bigger problems than stray cowboys." but as they walked toward the house, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of Ethan's gaze on her back. Inside, Maggie brewed coffee, while Clara cleaned soot from her hands. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his long legs stretched out, looking too comfortable for a man who claimed to be just passing through. "So, Ethan," Maggie said, setting mugs on the table, "what brings you to Cottonwood Bend? Not many folks come here unless they're running from something. Or to something." Clara watched him closely, catching the slight tightening of his jaw. "Looking for someone," he said, simply, his voice low. "An old friend. Lass, I heard he was in these parts." "Who's the friend?" Clara asked, her tone sharper than she meant. She didn't like vague answers, not when her ranch was under siege. Ethan met her gaze, and for a moment she thought he might dodge the question. "My brother," he said finally. "Caleb Cole. Haven't seen him in years." The name didn't ring a bell, but something in Ethan's voice, raw, almost pained, made Clara pause. She knew what it was to lose family, to carry that ache. But before she could ask more, Maggie leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Well, you're welcome to stay and look," Maggie said. "Clara could use the help, what with Randall's men sniffing around like wolves." "Maggie," Clara snapped, her cheeks warming, "I don't need anyone fighting my battles." Ethan's lips twitched, that almost smile again. "Didn't say you did, Miss Hayes, but 2 pairs of hands are better than 1 when wolves are at the door." Clara held his gaze, her pulse quickening. There was something about him, dangerous yet steady, that made her want to trust him, even if her instincts screamed to keep her guard up. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp knock at the door cut her off. Maggie frowned and rose to answer it. Standing on the porch was Tom Wheeler, the town's deputy, his badge glinting in the lantern light. His weathered face was grim, and his eyes darted to Ethan with suspicion. "Clara," Tom said. "Heard about the fire. You hurt?" "I'm fine," she said, stepping forward. "Thanks to Ethan here." Tom's gaze narrowed as he sized Ethan up. "Heard you ran off Randall's men. Mighty brave for a drifter." His tone held an edge, like he was fishing for something. Ethan didn't flinch. "Just doing what's right, Deputy." Tom grunted, then turned to Clara. "Randall's calling a town meeting tomorrow. Says he's got a proposition for the ranchers. I'd be there if I were you." Clara's stomach twisted. Randall's propositions usually came with threats. "I'll be there," she said, her voice firm. As Tom tipped his hat and left, Clara turned to Ethan, her mind racing.
"You're staying in town for this brother of yours,"
she said.
"But if you're sticking around, I need to know you're not working for Randall or anyone else."
Ethan leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath.
"I'm no one's man, Clara. Not Randall's, not anybody's. But if you will have me, I'll help you keep this ranch standing."
His words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Clara wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not yet. As she nodded slowly, a distant howl echoed through the night, and she wondered if the real danger was Randall's men or the stranger sitting across from her. And then, from the darkness beyond the ranch, a gunshot cracked through the silence. Who's out there, and what do they want? Will Clara trust Ethan to stand by her side? Subscribe and join us for Episode 3 to find out. Episode 3. Shadows of Trust. The gunshot echoed through the Montana night, sharp and cold as a blade. Clara Hayes froze on her porch, her heart hammering against her ribs. The lantern in Maggie's hand trembled, casting jittery shadows across the weathered boards. Ethan Cole was already moving, his revolver drawn, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the ranch. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice low but firm, like a man used to giving commands. Clara's temper flared. "This is my land," she snapped, grabbing a rifle from inside the door. "I'm not hiding while someone shoots at my home." Ethan's gaze flicked to her, a mix of frustration and something else. Admiration, maybe. "Fine," he said, "but stay low." Maggie clutched Clara's arm. "Clara, be careful. That shot wasn't random." "I know," Clara said, her jaw tight. She followed Ethan into the yard, the cool night air sharp against her skin. The moon hung low, bathing the fields in silver, but the shadows felt alive, hiding threats she couldn't see. They moved toward the fence line where the shot had come from. Ethan's steps were silent, his body tense but controlled, like a predator stalking prey. Clara matched his pace, her rifle ready, though her hands shook slightly. She didn't trust him, not fully, but right now he was the only one standing between her and whatever lurked in the dark. "There," Ethan whispered, pointing to a cluster of sagebrush near the creek. A glint of metal caught the moonlight. Before Clara could react, Ethan lunged forward, tackling a figure to the ground. The man grunted, struggling, but Ethan pinned him with ease, his knee pressing into the stranger's back. "Who sent you?" Ethan growled, twisting the man's arm. Clara stepped closer, her rifle trained on the figure. He was young, barely 20, with a scruffy beard and wild eyes. "Nobody," he spat. "I was just hunting." "Hunting with a pistol at night on my land?" Clara's voice was ice. "Try again." The boy's bravado faltered under her glare. "It was just a warn," he mumbled. "Mr. Randall said to scare you, that's all." Ethan hauled the boy to his feet, his grip unrelenting. "Tell Randall if he wants a fight, he'll get one. Now get out of here before I change my mind about letting you walk." The boy scrambled away, disappearing into the night. Clara lowered her rifle, her breath uneven. "This is never going to stop, is it?" she said, more to herself than to Ethan. He holstered his gun, his eyes softening as they met hers. "Not unless you make it stop," he said. "But you don't strike me as the type to run." The words hit her like a spark, igniting something warm and dangerous in her chest. She turned away, afraid he'd see it in her eyes. "Come on," she said. "We've got a town meeting to prepare for." The next morning, Cottonwood Bend buzzed with tension. The town hall, a squat wooden building, was packed with ranchers, their faces grim as they whispered about Randall's latest move. Clara sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan stood at the back, his hat low, his presence drawing curious glances. Maggie sat beside Clara, her chatter a welcome distraction. "He's trouble, that one," Maggie whispered, nodding toward Ethan. "Handsome trouble, but still trouble." Clara rolled her eyes. "I don't have time for trouble, Maggie. I've got a ranch to save." But her gaze drifted to Ethan, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. The memory of his steady hands fighting the fire His voice, promising to stand by her, lingered like a melody she couldn't shake. Jacob Randall strode to the front of the room, his tailored suit out of place among the dusty boots and worn hats. His smile was all teeth, like a wolf playing at civility. "Good people of Cottonwood Bend," he began, "I'm here to offer you a future. Sell your land to me and I'll build this town into something great. Railroads, prosperity, progress." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara's stomach churned. She knew what his progress meant. Her heir, her home swallowed by his greed. "And if we don't sell?" called Old Man Carter, a rancher with a voice like gravel. Randall's smile didn't waver. "Then you'll find it hard to stay. Accidents happen out here. Fires, rustlers, tragedies." The threat hung heavy, and Clara's hands clenched into fists. She stood, her voice cutting through the room. "You don't scare us, Randall. This land is ours, and we'll fight for it." The crowd stirred, some nodding, others looking nervous. Randall's eyes locked onto hers, cold and calculating. "Brave words, Mrs. Hayes, but bravery doesn't stop bullets." Before Clara could respond, Ethan's voice rang out from the back. "Neither does money, Randall. You want a war. You'll get one." All heads turned. Randall's smile faltered just for a moment. "And who are you, stranger?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "Someone who doesn't like bullies," Ethan said, stepping forward. The room went quiet, the air thick with tension. Clara's heart raced, torn between gratitude and fear. Ethan was drawing a line, but at what cost? The meeting dissolved into chaos. Ranchers arguing, Randall's men glaring from the corners. Clara slipped outside, needing air. Ethan followed, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You didn't have to do that," she said, turning to face him. "You're making yourself a target." Ethan shrugged, his eyes searching hers. "Maybe I'm used to being one." She stepped closer, her voice low. "Who are you, Ethan? Really? Because no one risks their life for a stranger without a reason." For a moment he was silent, his gaze distant, like he was looking at a memory. "I told you, I'm looking for my brother," he said finally. "But maybe I'm also looking for a reason to stay somewhere. For once." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of this man who'd stormed into her life like a summer squall. But before she could, Maggie burst out of the town hall, her face pale. "Clara, yo, you need to see this," she said, holding out a crumpled wanted poster. Clara's breath caught as she read the name, Caleb Cole. The sketch was rough, but the eyes were unmistakable, green like Ethan's. The charge, robbery with a reward of $500. Clara's eyes snapped to Ethan, who'd gone still, his face unreadable. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "is this your brother?" He didn't answer, but the shadow in his eyes told her everything. And as hoofbeats thundered down the street, carrying Randall's men toward them, Clara realized the danger was closer than ever. Is Ethan hiding the truth about his brother? And can Clara trust him with her ranch and her heart? Subscribe and join us for Episode 4 to find out. Episode 4. Whispers of the Past. The hoofbeats grew louder, a relentless drumbeat against the dusty street of Cottonwood Bend. Clara Hayes clutched the wanted poster, her eyes darting between the sketch of Caleb Cole and Ethan, who stood tense beside her. The moonlight glinted off his revolver, his jaw set like a man bracing for a storm. Maggie hovered nearby, her lantern casting flickering shadows, her usual chatter silenced by the approaching danger. "Clara, get inside," Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. "Now." "Not until you explain this," Clara snapped, holding up the poster. "Is Caleb your brother? And what else are you hiding?" Ethan's green eyes met hers, a flash of pain crossing his face before it hardened. "We don't have time for this," he said, stepping in front of her as 3 riders reined up, their horses snorting in the cool night air. They were Randall's men, their bandanas gone, faces hard and unshaven. "Well, well," the leader drawled, his hand resting on his holster. "The widow and her new guard. Dog!" "Randall wants a word, Mrs. Hayes." "Tell Randall he can come himself," Clara shot back, her rifle steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I'm done with his errand boys." The leader's smirk faltered, but before he could respond, Ethan stepped forward, his revolver raised. "Ride out," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Unless you want trouble you won't walk away from." The men exchanged glances, then backed off, their horses retreating into the darkness. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but her relief was short-lived. She turned to Ethan, the poster crumpled in her fist. "Talk," she demanded. "Now." Ethan holstered his gun, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Caleb's my brother," he admitted, his voice rough. "He got mixed up with the wrong crowd years ago. Robbed a stagecoach, or so they say. I haven't seen him since I was 20. I came here hoping he's still alive, hoping I can pull him out of whatever mess he's in." Clara searched his face, looking for a lie, but all she saw was raw honesty and a flicker of shame. "And you?" she asked. "What's your mess, Ethan? Because no one rides into a town like this and fights for a stranger without a past." He looked away, the moonlight carving shadows across his stubbled jaw. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he said quietly. "Rode with men like Randall's once. But I left that life. I'm here to make things right, not add to the trouble." Her heart twisted, torn between distrust and the pull of his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the man who'd saved her barn, her life. But trust was a fragile thing in Cottonwood Bend, and she'd learned the hard way that it could break. Maggie cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "You two can sort this out later," she said, her voice firm. "Clara, you need rest, and you, Mr. Cole, better not be bringing more trouble to her door." Ethan nodded, tipping his hat. "I'll keep watch tonight," he said. "No one's getting near Thigh." "So ranch." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She let Maggie lead her inside, but sleep didn't come. Her mind churned with images of Ethan's eyes, the wanted poster, and Randall's cold smile. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of hammering. She stepped outside to find Ethan repairing the scorched barn door, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat glistening on his forearms. The sight stirred something in her, a warmth she hadn't felt since James, and it scared her as much as it drew her. "You're still here," she said, crossing her arms to hide her unease. He glanced up, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Said I'd keep watch, figured I'd make myself useful." She studied him, the morning sun catching the green in his eyes. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan. Why stay?" He set down his hammer, his expression serious. "Because you're fighting for something real," he said. "This ranch, this life, it's worth saving, and maybe I need to prove I can be more than the man I was." His words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Clara's throat tightened, and for a moment she let herself imagine what it would be like to lean on him, to let someone share her burden. But before she could speak, a horse galloped up the trail, and Tom Wheeler, the deputy, reined in, his face grim. "Clara," he said, tipping his hat. "Randall's moving fast. He's got men watching every ranch in the valley, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "There's talk in town about your friend here. Someone recognized him from a saloon in Cheyenne. Said he used to run with the Blackthorn gang." Clara's blood ran cold. The Blackthorn gang was notorious. Train robbers, outlaws, the kind of men who'd sell their own kin for $1. She turned to Ethan, her voice sharp. "Is it true?" Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't look away. "I rode with them for a year," he admitted. "I was young, stupid. I left when I saw what they really were. That's not who I am now." Clara's hands balled to fists. "And you didn't think to tell me? I'm fighting for my home, Ethan, and I can't do that with a liar by my side." "Clara," he started, but she cut him off. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice breaking. She turned and walked back to the house, her heart a tangle of anger and hurt. But as she reached the porch, she heard it, a low, distant rumble, like thunder but wrong. Dust rose on the horizon, and her stomach dropped. "Riders," Tom said, drawing his gun. "A lot of them." Ethan was at her side in an instant, his hand on his revolver. "Clara, get inside. This isn't just Randall's errand boys. It's his whole crew." She grabbed her rifle, her resolve hardening. "I'm not running," she said, meeting his eyes. For a moment, despite everything, she saw something in him, regret, determination, and something deeper that made her heart skip. "Then we fight together," Ethan said, his voice steady. As the riders closed in, their silhouettes dark against the rising dust, Clara realized she was out of time to choose who to trust. And as the first shot rang out, she knew this battle would change everything. Can Clara and Ethan stand against Randall's men, and will the truth about Ethan's past tear them apart? Subscribe and join us for Episode 5 to find out. Episode 5, Fire and Promises. Dust churned under the hooves of a dozen riders, their silhouettes dark and menacing against the Montana dawn. Clara Hayes gripped a rifle, her back pressed against the barn's scorched wall, the acrid smell of smoke still lingering from the previous fire. Beside her, Ethan Cole crouched low, his revolver steady, his green eyes scanning the approaching men. Despite her anger, his presence was a steady anchor in the chaos, and it both comforted and unnerved her. "Clara, stay behind me," Ethan whispered, his voice taut but calm. "They're not here to talk." "I can handle myself," she shot back, her heart pounding. But as she met his gaze, she saw something new. Fear, not for himself, but for her. It softened the edges of her resolve, even as the riders' shouts grew louder. "Hayes!" a voice bellowed. Grady, Randall's right-hand man, his scarred face twisted in a sneer. "Time's up. Hand over the deed, or we burn this place to ash." Clara stepped out from the barn, her rifle raised, her voice steady despite the odds. "You'll have to kill me first," she called. "This is my home and I'm not giving it up." Grady laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and raised his hand to signal his men. But before they could move, Ethan stood, his revolver aimed at Grady's chest. "One step closer," he said, "and you're done." The riders hesitated, their horses shifting nervously. Clara's breath caught, the tension thick as the dust in the air. Then, a shot rang out, not from Grady's men, but from the ridge above. One of Randall's riders fell, clutching his shoulder, and chaos erupted. "Take cover," Ethan shouted, pulling Clara behind a stack of hay bales. Bullets whizzed past, splintering wood and kicking up dirt. Clara fired back, her shots precise, driven by years of defending her land. Ethan moved like a shadow, his revolver barking with deadly accuracy, dropping 2 more riders. "Who's up there?" Clara gasped between shots, her eyes darting to the ridge where the first shot had come from. "No idea," Ethan said, reloading swiftly. "But they're on our side, for now." The fight was brutal but brief. Outnumbered, Randall's men retreated, leaving 3 of their own sprawled in the dirt. Clara's ears rang as the gunfire faded, replaced by the thud of retreating hooves. She lowered her rifle, her hands shaking, and turned to Ethan. Blood streaked his arm where a bullet had grazed him. But he waved off her concern. "I'm fine," he said, his voice rough. "You hurt?" She shook her head, her chest tight with a mix of relief and lingering anger. "We need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "No more secrets." Before Ethan could respond, a figure emerged from the ridge, a man, lean and weathered, his hat pulled low. He carried a rifle, and his walk was cautious but confident. As he approached, Clara's eyes narrowed. There was something familiar about him, something in the set of his shoulders. "Ethan," the man called, his voice low and gravelly. "Didn't expect to find you in a mess like this." Ethan froze, his revolver still in hand. "Caleb?" he said, disbelief lacing his voice. Clara's heart skipped. "Caleb Cole, the man from the wanted poster." He was older than the sketch, his face lined with hard years, but those green eyes, so like Ethan's, confirmed it. She stepped back, her rifle half raised, torn between shock and suspicion. "Caleb," Ethan said again, stepping forward. "Where the hell have you been?" "Running," Caleb said, his voice bitter. "Same as you, little brother." He glanced at Clara, his gaze appraising. "This your fight or hers?" "Ours," Ethan said firmly, his eyes flicking to Clara. The word sent a shiver through her, but she pushed it aside, her mind racing. "You're a wanted man," she said to Caleb, her voice cold. "And you bring trouble to my ranch. Why should I let you stay?" Caleb's lips twitched, almost a smirk. "Because I just saved your hide, lady, and because Ethan's here, which means you're worth saving." Clara bristles, but Ethan stepped between them. "Enough," he said. "Clara, Caleb's no saint, but he's not with Randall. He's family." "Family doesn't always mean trust," she said, her voice low. She turned away, needing space, and walked toward the house. The weight of the morning, of the fight, Ethan's secrets, and now Caleb's arrival pressed down on her like a storm cloud. Inside, she sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Ethan followed, his boots heavy on the floor. He knelt beside her, his grazed arm still bleeding, but his focus was on her. "Clara," he said softly, "I should have told you about the Blackthorn gang. I was young, lost after my folks died. Caleb pulled me in, but I got out. I swear, I'm not that man anymore." She looked at him, his face close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the regret etched in his features. "I want to believe you," she whispered, "but every time I start to trust you, something new comes up. First your brother, now this gang. What's next, Etha?" He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Nothing," he said. "No more secrets. I'm here, Clara, for you, for this ranch, if you'll let me." Her breath caught, the air between them charged with unspoken longing. She pulled her hand back, not because she didn't want his touch, but because she wanted it too much. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, standing slowly. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he stepped outside to join Caleb, Clara's gaze fell on a letter tucked under a book on the table, one she hadn't noticed before. It was addressed to her, the handwriting sharp and unfamiliar. She broke the seal, her heart pounding as she read the words, "Sell the ranch by sundown tomorrow, or you'll lose more than your land." A shadow moved outside the window, and Clara's blood ran cold. Someone was watching, and they weren't alone. Who's watching Clara, and what does Randall's ultimatum mean? Will she let Ethan back into her? Her heart. Subscribe and join us for episode 6 to find out. Episode 6. Under the Storm Shadow. The shadow outside Clara Hayes' window vanished as quickly as it appeared, but the chill it left lingered in her bones. She clutched the threatening letter, its words seared into her mind. "Sell the ranch by sundown tomorrow, or you'll lose more than your land." The paper trembled in her hands, the ink stark against the flickering lantern light. Outside, the Montana night was heavy with the promise of a storm, the air thick with the scent of rain and danger. "Clara?" Ethan Cole's voice broke her reverie, soft but urgent. He stood in the doorway, his hat in hand, blood still staining his sleeve from the graze he'd taken in the shootout. Behind him, Caleb leaned against the porch railing, his rifle propped nearby, his green eyes, so like Ethan's, watching the horizon. Clara folded the letter, tucking it into her pocket. "Someone was out there," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Watching us." Ethan's jaw tightened, and he stepped inside, his boots thudding on the wooden floor. "Randall's men," he said. "They're trying to scare you into folding." "They're doing a fine job," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She met his gaze, searching for the truth in those pine-green eyes. "But I'm not selling. Not now, not ever." Ethan nodded, a flicker of pride crossing his face. "Then we need a plan. Randall's not bluffing. He'll come for you, hard." Caleb stepped inside, his presence filling the small room with an uneasy edge. "He's right," he said, his voice rough from years on the run. "Randall's got men, guns, and money. You've got grit, Mrs. Hayes, but that won't stop a bullet." Clara's eyes narrowed. "And you're an expert on dodging bullets, aren't you, Mr. Cole? Seeing as you're a wanted man." Caleb's smirk was sharp, but his gaze held no malice. "Fair enough, but I'm here now, and I owe Ethan. That means I'm in this fight, whether you like it or not." She glanced at Ethan, who stood silent. His expression was torn. The weight of his past, the Blackthorn gang, his brother's crimes, hung between them like a storm cloud. But so did his promise to stay, and the memory of his hand on hers, warm and steady, made her heart ache in ways she wasn't ready to face. "We'll talk strategy at dawn," she said finally. "For now, I need air." She stepped onto the porch, the night wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning flickered, illuminating the vast Montana plains. Ethan followed, keeping his distance but close enough that she felt his presence like a tether. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the wind. "I know you don't trust me, not fully, but I meant what I said, Clara. I'm here." She turned to face him, the lantern light casting shadows across his rugged features. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why risk everything for a ranch that's not yours, for a woman you barely know?" Ethan stepped closer, close enough to hat. She could smell the leather and sweat on him, could see the storm in his eyes. "Because you're not just any woman," he said. "You're fighting for something bigger than yourself. And I've spent too long running from that kind of courage. I want to be the man who stands by you, Clara, if you'll let me." Her breath caught, her heart pounding against her ribs. The air between them crackled as if the coming storm had settled in the space where their hands nearly touched. She wanted to reach for him, to let go of the walls she'd built since James's death, but fear held her back, not of Randall, but of what it would mean to let Ethan in. Before she could speak, a crack of thunder shook the earth and rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, soaking her dress and his shirt. Ethan didn't move, his eyes locked on hers, rain streaking down his face. "Clara," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm, "I've got nothing left to hide. If you want me gone, I'll go. But if you let me stay, I'll fight for you until my last breath." The words broke something in her. She stepped forward, closing the distance, and for a moment she let herself imagine a world where she wasn't alone, where his promises could be real. Her hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through her despite the cold rain. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, "but I want to." Ethan's hand closed gently around hers, his thumb tracing a circle against her palm. "That's enough for now," he said, his voice rough with emotion. A shout from the barn snapped them apart. Caleb stood there, his rifle raised, his eyes fixed on the trail. "Riders!" he called. "Coming fast!" Clara grabbed her rifle from the porch, her heart racing as she peered through the rain. Lightning flashed, revealing a single horse galloping toward the ranch. Not Randall's men, but Maggie, her auburn hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with panic. "Clara," Maggie gasped, reining in her horse. "It's the tow. Randall's men are rounding up the ranchers, forcing them to sign over their deeds. They've got Tom Wheeler locked in the jail." Clara's blood ran cold. Tom, the deputy, was one of the few who'd stood up to Randall. If he was out of the picture, the town was defenseless. She turned to Ethan, her resolve hardening. "We're going to town," she said. "Now!" Ethan nodded, but Caleb grabbed his arm. "You go in there, you're walking into a trap," he warned. "Randall knows who you are, Ethan. He knows about the Blackthorn gang. And he's got a man waiting for you, a bounty hunter." Clara's heart stopped. A bounty hunter. Not just for Caleb, but for Ethan too. She looked at him, rain dripping from his hat, and saw the truth in his eyes. A past he couldn't outrun, and a fight that was now hers as well. As the storm raged and the riders' hoofbeats echoed in the distance, Clara realized the battle for her ranch was about to become a war for their lives. Will Clara and Ethan face the bounty hunter and save the town? And can their fragile trust survive the storm? Episode 7. The Bounty Hunter's Shadow. Rain lashed the Montana plains, turning the dirt to mud as Clara Hayes gripped her rifle, her eyes fixed on the approaching riders. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Maggie's pale face and the tense figures of Ethan and Caleb Cole beside her. The storm's roar mingled with the thunder of hoofbeats, but Clara's heart pounded louder, fueled by the weight of the letter in her pocket and Caleb's warning. A bounty hunter was coming. Not just for him, but for Ethan too. "Clara, get to cover," Ethan shouted, his voice cutting through the downpour. He pulled her toward the barn, his hand firm on her arm, while Caleb took position behind a water trough, his rifle ready. "No more running," Clara said, planting her feet. "This is my fight." Ethan's green eyes flashed with frustration, but also something softer. Respect, or maybe more. "Then we do it together," he said, drawing his revolver. "But stay sharp." Maggie, soaked and shivering, clutched Clara's strown. "Leave." "You can't take on Randall's whole crew and a bounty hunter," she whispered. "Let's get to town, free Tom." Clara shook her head. "If we don't stop them here, there won't be a town left to save." The riders slowed, their shapes resolving in the rain. 6 men, led by a tall figure in a black duster, his hat low, a rifle slung across his back. He didn't wear Randall's colors, and his calm, deliberate movements set him apart. This was no hired thug. This was the bounty hunter. "Caleb Cole!" the man called, his voice cold as the rain. "And Ethan, I presume. Step out and we can do this clean." Clara's heart sank. She glanced at Ethan, whose face was stone, his revolver steady. "Stay out of this, Clara," he murmured. "This one's mine." "Like hell it is," she snapped, stepping forward. "You're on my land, mister," she shouted to the bounty hunter. "State your business, or you'll taste my rifle." The man dismounted, his boots splashing in the mud. Lightning revealed a scarred face and eyes like flint. "Name's Silas Kane," he said. "I'm here for the Cole brothers. 500 for Caleb, dead or alive. 200 for Ethan. Randall's paying extra to see you both gone." Ethan stiffened, his grip tightening on his gun. "I'm not wanted, Kane. You're chasing ghosts." Kane's smile was thin. "Your name's on a poster in Cheyenne, boy. Blackthorn gang don't leave loose ends." Clara's breath caught, her eyes flicking to Ethan. He'd sworn he'd left that life, but the doubt gnawed at her. Still, she raised her rifle, her voice steady. "You're not taking anyone from my ranch." Kane's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Caleb fired a warning shot into the mud at his feet. "Back off, Silas," Caleb growled. "You want to fight? You'll get one." The standoff stretched taut, rain drumming around them. Then, one of Randall's men twitched, reaching for his gun, and chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded, bullets tearing through the storm. Clara dove behind the barn, firing back, her breath hot, finding one rider's shoulder. Ethan moved like a shadow, his revolver dropping another. Caleb held his ground, his rifle barking with precision. Kane, unfazed, aimed at Ethan, but Clara's shot grazed his arm, forcing him to duck. "Stay down!" she shouted, her voice raw. Ethan glanced at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, and together they pushed back the attackers. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Kane and the remaining men retreated, vanishing into the storm, but Clara knew it wasn't over. She lowered her rifle, her chest heaving, rain streaming down her face. Ethan was at her side, his hand brushing her arm, checking for wounds. "You're reckless," he said, his voice rough but warm. "But damn if you don't fight like hell." Clara managed a shaky laugh, her adrenaline fading. "Had to. Couldn't let you have all the fun." Maggie ran to them, her eyes wide. "You're both insane," she said, but her voice held relief. Caleb joined them, his expression grim. "Kane won't stop," he said. "And Randall's got the town in his grip. We need to move, now." Clara nodded, her mind racing. "We'll head to town, free Tom and rally the ranchers. But first," she turned to Ethan, her heart heavy. "No more lies, Ethan. Are you wanted? Is Kane right?" Ethan's face softened, rain dripping from his hat. He stepped closer, his voice low, meant only for her. "I swear, Clara, I'm not on any poster. I left the Blackthorn gang before they pinned anything on me. Kane's either mistaken, or Randall's paying him to lie." She searched his eyes, wanting to believe him. The storm had slowed, and the moonlight broke through, casting a silver glow over his face. Her hand reached out, almost on its own, touching his soaked shirt. "I'm trying," she said softly. "I'm trying to trust you." He covered her hand with his touch warm against the cold rain. "That's all I ask," he said. "Let me prove it." For a moment the world narrowed to just them, the rain a soft curtain around their share. Clara's heart ached, torn between fear and the pull of something deeper. She pulled away, her voice firm. "Let's go to town. We end this tonight." They saddled their horses, Caleb leading the way, Maggie close behind. But as they rode into Cottonwood Bend, the town was eerily quiet, the streets empty under the clearing sky. The jail loomed ahead, its windows dark. Clara's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. As they dismounted, a figure stepped from the shadows of the saloon, his rifle gleaming. It was Silas Kane, alone, his scarred face set in a grim line. "You should have run, Ethan," he said. "Randall's got a surprise for you, and it's waiting inside." Clara's heart stopped as the jail door creaked open, revealing a figure bound and gagged, Tom Wheeler, his face bruised. And behind him stood Jacob Randall himself, a pistol pressed to the deputy's head. Can Clara and Ethan save Tom and outsmart Randall? And what is the trap waiting for them? Subscribe and join us for Episode 8 to find out. Episode 8, Moonlight's Last Stand. The jail door creaked open, its rusty hinges a scream in the quiet Cottonwood Bend night. Clara Hayes tightened her grip on her rifle, her heart pounding, as Jacob Randall stepped into view, his pistol pressed against Deputy Tom Wheeler's temple. Tom's face was bruised, his eyes defiant despite the gag in his mouth. Behind Clara, Ethan Cole stood ready, his revolver drawn, while Caleb flanked them, his own rifle trained on the shadows where Silas Kane, the bounty hunter, lurked. The moonlight bathed the street in silver, but the air was thick with the promise of blood. "Drop your weapons," Randall said, his voice smooth as venom, "or the deputy's brains paint the wall." Clara's stomach twisted, but her resolve held. "You're a coward, Randall," she called, her voice steady. "Hiding behind a hostage won't save you." Randall's smile was cold, his tailored suit pristine despite the dust of the town. "Brave words, Mrs. Hayes, but bravery won't stop what's coming. This town is mine. Your ranch, your neighbor's land, all of it." Ethan stepped forward, his green eyes blazing. "Let him go, Randall. This is between you and us." Kane emerged from the saloon's shadows, his scarred face unreadable, his rifle aimed at Ethan. "Not just Randall," he said. "You've got a price on your head, Cole. Both of you." He nodded toward Caleb, who stood unflinching. Clara's heart raced. She'd heard Ethan's promises, felt the warmth of his hand in the rain. But Kane's words stirred the doubt she'd fought to bury. Was Ethan truly free of his past, or was he still running from it? She pushed the thought aside. She had to trust him now, or they'd all be dead. "Enough talk," she said, raising her rifle. "Let Tom go, or I shoot." Randall laughed, but his eyes flicked to the street where shadows moved. Clara's breath caught. More of Randall's men, circling like wolves. They were outnumbered, trapped in the open, but then a clatter of hooves broke the silence. And Maggie rode up, leading a group of ranchers, Old Man Carter, the widow Jenkins, and others, armed with rifles and fury. "You're not alone, Clara," Maggie shouted, her auburn curls wild in the moonlight. "The town's had enough of Randall's tyranny." The ranchers fanned out, their weapons trained on Randall's men. The odds had shifted, but Randall's pistol didn't waver from Tom's head. "You think this rabble can stop me?" he sneered. "I own this town." "Not anymore," Clara said, her voice ringing. She glanced at Ethan, a silent understanding passing between them. They'd fight together, no matter the cost. Ethan moved first, diving to the side as he fired, his bullet grazing Randall's arm. Tom seized the moment, elbowing Randall and breaking free. Chaos erupted, gunfire exploded, bullets tearing through the night. Clara fired at Kane, forcing him to duck, while Caleb took down one of Randall's men. The ranchers joined the fray, their shots echoing with years of pent-up anger. Clara fought with a precision, her years in the ranch honing her aim. But Kane was relentless, his rifle tracking Ethan through the chaos. "You can't outrun your past, Cole," he shouted, firing a shot that narrowly missed. Ethan tackled Clara behind a barrel as a bullet splintered the wood above them. "Stay down," he gasped, his body shielding hers. Their faces were inches apart, his breath warm against her cheek. "I won't let him take you." Her heart pounded, not just from the fight, but from the intensity in his eyes. "I'm not losing you either," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. He froze, a flicker of hope crossing his face. But before he could respond, Caleb shouted, "Ethan, watch out!" Kane had circled around, his rifle aimed. Clara acted on instinct, firing from behind the barrel. Her shot hit Kane's shoulder and he staggered, dropping his weapon. The tide turned. Randall's men, seeing their boss wounded and Kane down, began to flee. Randall himself backed toward them. Jail, his pistol shaking. "This isn't over, Hayes," he spat, before disappearing into the shadows. The gunfire stopped, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and Maggie's relieved sobs. Tom, freed from his gag, clasped Clara's shoulder. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "You gave the town its spine back." But Clara's eyes were on Ethan, who was helping Caleb to his feet. Blood stained Caleb's shirt. A bullet had grazed his side. "You all right?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "Been worse," Caleb grunted, but his eyes were on Clara. "You're one hell of a woman, Mrs. Hayes. My brother's lucky." Clara's cheeks warmed, but she turned to Ethan. "We need to find Randall," she said. "He'll come back." Ethan nodded, but his gaze held hers, heavy with unspoken words. "Clara, not now," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Let's finish this." They searched the town, but Randall was gone, his horse tracks leading into the hills. Kane, wounded but alive, was tied up and left for the company. Sheriff from the next town over. As dawn broke, painting the sky gold, the ranchers gathered in the street, their faces weary but hopeful. Cottonwood Bend was theirs again, at least for now. Clara returned to her ranch with Ethan and Caleb, the morning air crisp and clean after the storm. At the barn, she paused, the weight of the fight settling over her. Ethan stood beside her, his hat low, his presence steady. "You asked me why I stayed," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "It's because of you, Clara. I've been running my whole life, but here, with you, I found something worth fighting for." She turned to him, her heart full. The doubts, the fears, they were still there, but they were quieter now, drowned out by the truth in his eyes. "I was scared to trust you," she admitted, stepping closer. "But you've been by my side through every fight. I don't want to face the next one without you." Ethan's hand found hers, his touch warm and sure. "Then you won't," he said. He leaved over freeze. Ned in and under the Montana dawn, their lips met. A kiss soft at first, then deepening with the promise of a future they'd built together. Caleb cleared his throat, a wry grin on his face. "I'll give you 2 a minute," he said, limping toward the house. "But Ethan, we need to talk about my next move. I can't stay." Clara pulled back, her eyes on Ethan. "What about Caleb?" she asked. "He's still wanted." Ethan's face darkened. "I'll help him clear his name," he said. "But first, I'm staying here, with you." As they stood together, the ranch bathed in morning light, a distant shout broke the peace. Maggie rode up, her face pale. "Clara, Ethan, there's a letter at the saloon. Randall left it. He says he's coming back with an army, and he's got proof Ethan's still wanted." Clara's heart sank, but she squeezed Ethan's hand. They'd faced fire, bullets, and betrayal together. Whatever Randall had planned, they'd face it as one. Did you catch the clues to Ethan's past and Randall's schemes?
Watch episodes 1 through 7 to uncover the secrets, and comment below. Can Clara and Ethan defeat Randall for good? Thank you for joining us under the Montana moon. Thank you for spending time with us. Before you go, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss new stories. In the comments, share your thoughts and recommend the next historical tale you want us to tell.